If you ever go to a bus station, what you'll notice at the bus station is there are lots of different doors, and each door belongs to a different bus. And so there are many different entry points in a bus station. And depending on the entry point that you choose, you're going to end up in a completely different destination. Just depending upon which door that you go through, which entry point that you begin with, is going to be a completely different outcome. If I walk through one door, I might end up in Bristol. If I walk through another door, I might end up in Glasgow. And the reason why I'm talking about buses and bus stations and which door you go in being important, it's because our days are often like that as well, aren't they? Depending on which kind of action we take at the very, very beginning, it can take us in a completely different destination. So let's think, for instance, I don't know, let's say you get up first thing in the morning and you get up and you have your breakfast maybe, and then it's that point, isn't it, where, I don't know, maybe you've got this project that you've got in mind for yourself to do. So you sit down at your computer and you've got two choices here. Sometimes you might just go straight to your project and get working. And another time, I don't know, you might put Facebook on or, put the sports news on or whatever. And next thing you know, you've gone down a bit of a scroll and a click, and you've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, and you haven't done any of the work, and you're about an hour down the lane. Whereas if your entry point was different, if your entry point wasn't, say, Facebook or the sports news, if you'd gone through a different door, in other words, you'd have done an hour's work on that project that's so important at this point. Now, maybe you don't want to do a project, and of course that was only an example, but there are certain things which, like the doors of those buses, act as entry points to a different destination. So, I don't know, if I notice, for instance, that when I'm jogging, the thing that is my entry point to making sure that happens is I get my jogging kit on straight away. In fact, even the night before, I get it out. And so these small acts, no smaller than just walking through a door, will get you to a completely different destination. Those small acts of just getting your jogging kit out or making sure that you put it on first thing in the morning, that as an entry point will change the rest of my day, because doing that will ensure that I go out and have a jog. Whereas, I don't know, if I put different clothes on, if I put a pair of jeans on, for instance, and a jumper, I can pretty much guarantee that I'm not going to go for a jog that day. And so I'm just pointing this out to you because these entry points, these doorways to different destinations, they might seem very, very small. After all, at a bus station, you're only walking through a door. And walking through this door doesn't feel a whole heap different from walking through that door. And yet, depending upon what that early choice is, that very small action, you'll end up going in a completely different destination. And so I'm drawing your attention to that because these entry points do happen in our lives as well. And depending on what those early entry points are, they too can take you to a different destination. And so my invite to you today is just a very brief one. It's to kind of notice the different entry points that happen for you. Notice the kind of things that you want, the kind of outcomes that you want, and identify when those outcomes happen. What was the entry point that led you to that destination? What was the very first small step? What was the metaphorical door that you walked through that led you to that destination rather than another one? And when those outcomes don't happen, by the same token, what was the metaphorical door that you went through that time that led you away from the thing that you wanted to do. Because these entry points are everywhere in our life. And so if we're aware of them, and if we know what it is that we want to happen, whether it be a jog or working on your project or eating healthily or whatever it happens to be, you can trace back any time that that thing actually does happen, and it will happen during your life. You can just trace it back and say, well, what was the very first step that I took that led me directly to that thing that I wanted? Because when we take that very first step and we take it in the right direction, then it changes just from that one small step. It changes the rest of everything that happens afterwards. So these entry points are important, much like the door that you step through at a bus depot is important. So are these as well. And the steps that you take are going to completely transform what happens after that step. And so if you can identify those entry points for yourself, then just with very, very small changes, you can actually have a quite transformative effect with very little effort. So that's all for today. Thanks for listening. If you like this, spread it around by sharing it. Subscribe to the podcast for free wherever you get them. You can watch them as videos on psychotherapy.com. And if you wanted to work with me, I'm Alun Parry from the Liverpool Psychotherapy practice at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again tomorrow.